Hi, everyone. This is Drew Morrison, candidate for Montgomery County Council in District 1. As part of our policy rollout this week, we're talking with partners and friends who have worked with us on important policy initiatives facing Montgomery County. One of the key pieces of the future of Montgomery County's energy and environment strategy is the Montgomery County Green Bank. So, to talk about our experience working together on that and the vision for the future of energy, the environment, and the Green Bank for Montgomery County, I'm glad to be joined by Reed Hundt. Reed, how are you?
Hi, great to see you, Drew. I'm a member of your campaign fan club, and my wife and I live in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and we wish you the best.
Thank you so much. Well, Reed, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about your background professionally, the work that you did, and how you came to be engaged in green capital and work around green banks.
Well, we've lived in Chevy Chase since 1980, and so, it's been a long time of seeing the county grow and develop. In the year 2009, I was part of the Obama transition team, and I went to then Congressman Chris Van Hollen and said, how can we cause people to get cheap, clean power? And he said, well, let's write a statute that will create a national green bank. And I said, that's an interesting word, green and bank. I said, green and bank are not very popular words. He said, we'll put them together, people will get used to them. And so that from 2009 stretched out to a 15-year story culminating in a $5 billion grant to a national green bank. But on the way, I met with Roger Berliner and the rest of the Montgomery County Council, and you're going to talk about that from your perspective. And we decided that it was really important to think not just nationally, but locally, because most electricity is made and consumed within about 150 mile radius. It's a very localized industry. We don't think of it that way when we see these big high voltage transmission lines stretching across the landscape in certain parts of the country. But really, electricity is a very localized industry, and it's very important for people to know that they can and should be producing their electricity cheaply and cleanly nearby. So well, why don't you take over, Drew, and talk about your perceptions about the Montgomery County Green Bank, which you know that we ultimately created?
Yes, thanks so much, Reed. And really, I think starting from about a decade ago, when you came to Roger and me with this concept, what really excited us about the concept of a green bank was the opportunity to not only help us make more progress on our energy and environment goals, but also to find ways to really stimulate a clean energy economy that allowed the transition to greener, cleaner, and more affordable sources of energy to not only be a compliance challenge, but to be an actual opportunity to create jobs here in Montgomery County that were aligned with our goals and to hopefully incubate an economy, a whole sector that was really leading here in Montgomery County. And some of the results we see with the Green Bank today, just last year, the projects they invested in supported over 700 jobs. And that was really what we were interested in seeing. How do we marry what we want to achieve on the environment with what we want to achieve in terms of local economic development? Reed, in your experience, I assume that was some of what you were thinking about too in trying to marry these two words of green and bank together.
Well, first of all, that linkage was really Chris Van Hollen's, and of course he became a senator, and Chris, and then Jamie, who took his place, at the congressional level. They've been big champions of this from the beginning. But I give you a lot of credit for a whole bunch of insights that proved to be true. And the county is lucky to have somebody who's a visionary, but also very practical, as you are, Drew. Let me just list a few of them. You thought that solar power would get cheaper and cheaper, and even in an occasionally cloudy state like Maryland, which isn't as, sunny every single day as, say, New Mexico, but still has, a lot of solar power potential. You thought that solar panels would get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. That proved to be right. You thought that electric vehicles would get cheaper and cheaper. That proved to be right. You had the insight that as the county became more dense and had more commercial buildings, those buildings, should use energy more efficiently in order to make profits and be cheaper for people to rent space in. All of that was right also. I think what would really be good would be for a county that's as big as some and bigger than some of our states, which is Montgomery County. It's just a huge economically important, part of the United States, right? And it's population wise, in the ballpark of what, a third of the percent of a 1% of the whole country's population. And of course, being close to Washington, D.C., there's a lot of people involved in the national government who are also residents of Montgomery County. So this is a place where leadership can be shown, and I give you a lot of credit for showing that leadership years ago, and now being willing to take that to a new level in your campaign, to be on the county council.
Thanks so much. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things is that when we were first bringing the green bank concept forward, we got a bunch of quizzical looks. Of course, at that time, people in Connecticut knew about a green bank and what it could provide. But most people around here, when we said green bank, were sort of wondering what this was going to turn out to be. And I think what we've seen over the last decade is after we put the legislation in place, and that's really the core of the work that I did, working with you and with Roger and the full council to craft an implementing bill that would allow us to create a green bank. And then over the last decade, we've seen some of the additional ingredients come in. We needed a source of steady funding. We got some initial seed capital from the Pepco Exelon merger, which I worked on working with Roger to fight for consumers, to fight for the environment, and getting that money to help seed the green bank was essential. And now we've got a regular stream of funds coming into the green bank, though not always consistently. And last year there was a big cut proposed by the executive to the green bank. So really what I see for the future is we really need to make sure that we've got a dedicated stream of revenues that allows us to really make sure that the green bank can deliver on its promise. And we've seen some, really meaningful impacts. Just last year, over $82 million in new investments. Many of those investments focused on new solar panels, helping commercial and multifamily buildings do major energy efficiency retrofits, and working towards the conversion of more of our cars to electric vehicles by making sure that we have the EV chargers that we need. So we've seen the
So, Drew,
opportunity, and we really need to deliver on that vision.
I just think you ought to get a lot of credit for a couple of things for sure. Number one, in getting the Green Bank to become part of the public sector activity in Montgomery County, you were able to work with all the other council members and get them to adopt an idea that none of them had ever heard of until you knocked on their doors and explained it to them. So I give you a lot of credit for that. The other thing is your vision of driving investment with public money joined up with private money. That's exactly the way that Montgomery County can continue to grow economically. We have a lot of different counties in the country, and some of them don't grow economically, and some do. We want to be one of the ones that is always growing.
Yes, and I think that one of the areas where we can really have a comparative advantage, and fundamentally, when we look at the economic development challenges that we're facing, we want to start to
Yeah.
stand out. We know we can't rely on the federal government forever, but we have this local source of advantage, which is that mixing of the public and the private dollars.